as designers, if you happen to be in a part of the world that doesn't have a strong planning system, have very strong opinions about what creates good neighborhoods, good urban neighborhoods, and try to argue with whoever to get those implemented.
Bringing nature to our buildings and to our people is crucial. And, there's something that deeply touched me that Charles Moore said. He said that there are two essential things that human beings crave for. One is to belong, to be a part of a community, and the other is to live in the forest.
So the darling of developers. It delivers high densities, which is great. It's highly productive and sustainable, and it has small land take. But this is the real problem with them. Terrible spatial definition. The tower, by design, is really a collection of facades which trades its relationship to the ground in order to provide limitless functions above. The ground is sacrificed in the expense of building logistics, lift cores, servicing. Therefore, it requires the plinth to expand that footprint and retain its functional diversity and contribute positively to the urban environment.
It was because of our collaboration with the residents, we got an appointment with the environmental minister, Aditya Thackeray, who, we had three options. This was the best one, which disturbed the forest floor least, etc., made out of wood, and he selected this.
Hello everyone, my name is Pooja Tiwari and I'm truly excited to welcome all of you to episode 8 of VC Live Season 3. For those of you joining us for the first time, VC Live is brought to you by the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, GVCC, an initiative by Godrej Locks and Architectural Solutions. Before we dive into today's conversation, let me quickly introduce GVCC, a dynamic community of 2,000 architects and interior designers focused on sharing knowledge, nurturing collaborations, and celebrating design excellence. If you haven't signed up yet, check out the link in the chat box and become part of this ever-growing design fraternity. Let's take a quick look at what GVCC is all about.
Welcome to the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, where innovation meets collaboration. GVCC is a unique platform for architects and interior designers to merge their creative visions with our innovative product offerings. We aim to cultivate a network of thought leaders, driving innovation and excellence in the industry. Celebrate your achievements with our GV's Awards, recognizing innovative projects across various verticals. Join our community through exhibition visits and masterclasses to stay updated on the latest trends and technologies. Enjoy exclusive access to new products, special discounts, and tours of our Mumbai and Goa plants. Join the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club today. Be part of a community that values innovation, collaboration, and sustainability.
Godrej Locks and Architectural Solutions, a leading and trusted home safety business, has announced the launch of its latest brand campaign, and that is Befikar Living Unlocked, introducing the next-gen Adventist to IoT 9 digital lock. The campaign highlights Godrej's commitment to enhancing home safety through innovation and a new television commercial that creatively addresses everyday safety concerns. Let's have a look at the video.
Thrusters.
Check. Door lock check.
डोर लॉक घर का डोर लॉक किया था या भूल गया
घर का लॉक
फटाफट से चेक करके आऊं क्या
ले आइए गोदरेज IoT 9 डिजिटल लॉक, 9 सिक्योर एक्सेस मोड्स, ऑटोमेटिक लॉकिंग ट्रिपल बोर्ड और कई एडवांस फीचर्स। अब घर के अंदर या बाहर रहो बेफिक्र।
घर जाते ही गोदरेज डिजिटल लॉक लगवाऊंगा।
VC Live is a monthly thought leadership series featuring some of the most influential minds in architecture and design. Across seasons, we have explored everything from smart living to material innovation and human-centered design. This season, we are diving into the theme Future Forward, a journey into transformative thinking, where innovation meets sustainability and technology reshapes our cities and spaces. Today's episode, which is Rethinking Urban Life, Design Strategies That Matter, brings together two urban visionaries to discuss how cities must evolve to remain livable, inclusive, and human-centered. We'll end the session with an interactive Q&A session, so please keep your questions coming in the Q&A tab throughout. Let's jump on to today's topic. Our first speaker is Mr. Shawn Meyers, urban designer at DLR Group Middle East, with an incredible career that spans New York, London, Paris, and Dubai. Shawn brings a rare global perspective to urban design. His portfolio includes award-winning large-scale city planning initiatives such as the Dubai Expo Master Plan and strategic studies for NEOM future cities. Let's give a warm welcome to Shawn Meyers. We're looking forward to his thoughts on what it takes to build cities that are livable, connected, and future-ready. A warm welcome, Shawn. Thank you so much for joining in. Over to you.
Thank you, Pooja. I really am very excited to be here, and thanks for Godrej for having me. I'm excited to share some ideas that we have been applying in our projects about how we can design better cities. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Wait. Sorry, that's not the right screen. 1 second. Yeah, that is the right screen. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, okay. Second. Sorry, I'm a Teams user. So, okay. Perfect. Okay, great. So, hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Shawn. I'm an urban designer, and I'm the director of master planning at DLR Group. And what I'm about to show is some of the research we've been doing on how we should be thinking more holistically about large-scale development. I practice from Dubai, but the ideas here that I'll be sharing are widely applicable to other parts of the world that are undergoing rapid urbanization, Indian cities, for example. So first, a little bit about DLR Group, just to say that we are a company of designers and we are intensely passionate about design, specifically the power of design to enact positive change in our communities. And this will be a presentation about design, but not in the traditional sense. I'm not going to be talking about aesthetics. I'll be talking about designing for a better spatial performance of our cities. And we're going to be asking ourselves some questions. What is that beautiful house? Where does that highway go to? Am I right? Am I wrong? Or what have I done? So who here cares deeply about cities? I'd imagine you could raise your emoji hands. But better yet, who cares deeply about how we can help evolve and improve them? So, a little foreshadowing. Urbanization is the process of managing the growth of a city. Ildefonso Cerdà was the first person to actively think about spatially about how you manage the growth of a city in Barcelona, 1863. And you can see in this picture in the bottom right corner, the existing urban fabric. And you can imagine the type of life people were living there. And then the expansion, what he had designed, takes up the rest of the image. And 160 years later, Barcelona is still one of the most beloved, lively, and cherished cities on the planet. It's really astounding for the value that it could deliver. So what kind of cities are we getting now? How are our cities currently expanding? Let's look at some of the cities that we call home, at least in the Middle East. So we have Dubai. We have Doha. We have Riyadh. And you might notice something odd. Other than the lack of green that I saw in Rahul's presentation, there's going to be much more of that. Really, what we're looking at is our cities are out of balance. They're growing out of balance. Our cities here are comprised of low-rise single-family homes or high-rise towers. And this is having problematic effects as both of these typologies are terrible at defining space, as I will later explain. And having coherent, well-defined neighborhood structures is a prerequisite for delivering long-term value for urban growth. And I can hear somebody on the call saying, well, what about old Dubai, or what about some of our heritage neighborhoods? Well, we're not building those anymore, but perhaps we should. Let's look at what the market is giving us now. So we all know that stat. The world is urbanizing. 70% of the people will be living in cities by 2050. Well, actually, the world is suburbanizing. It's not urbanizing. Unfortunately, the gated community is the most the most popular form of housing being built globally, and I would argue the worst form of housing. I call it America's most dangerous export. The physical consequence of single-family homes spatially is, by definition, an array of houses and walls designed to separate people while utilizing tremendous resources. It's the spatial equivalent of an echo chamber. This is one of the most valuable neighborhoods in Dubai, Jumeirah. It's right next to the Burj Al Arab, and the sea is just off the horizon. But the houses are concerned with only themselves. The street becomes meaningless beyond a conduit for movement. If we're going to address the macro issues of our time, our response to climate change, housing affordability, access to opportunity, we have to build differently in our cities. So how did we get here? Dubai has the 4th most towers globally. We have enormous tower blocks. This is DIFC just to explain. This is DIFC, the kind of the center of the International Financial Center. So we have enormous tower blocks capable of containing incredible activity. The problem is that each of these tower blocks is conceived as an introverted development, and that's due to neighborhood uncertainty, which is a result of bad planning, and resulting in, again, the loss of the street. So we have a neighborhood which is underpinned by competition instead of collaboration, and the street is, again, solely to move vehicles. So we have to define the problem, and it's really as much a question of design as it is how we're organized as an industry. The separation of architecture and planning into segregated domains for efficiency and speed has left each discipline impotent to deal with the ruptured, decentralized, and fast-changing context that we live in. This means we have planners who are unable to convey the special responsibilities of their plans to future plot architects, or more problematic, we have architects trying to master plan as if making a beautiful plan is the main objective. But let's remove all ambiguity. The objective of master planning is creating a body of work that will galvanize diverse stakeholders, often with competing interests, to work together to achieve a shared vision. So back to the problem. This isn't just a Middle East thing. This is really the case in many fast-growing cities around the globe, but it's acutely felt here because we are young cities with few matured neighborhood structures. And furthermore, the market is delivering us a form of novelty urbanism. Live on an island, live on a canal, live on an island with a canal. New development and also ultra-luxury development, which is quite prevalent here, has lost the relationship between the neighborhood and the city. So how do we get here? A city like New York, capable of linking density with economic growth, creating meaningful streets that are productive and livable. Should we add more towers? New York City has the 3rd most towers globally. Dubai is the 4th. You probably guessed my answer. The answer is no. To create successful urban neighborhoods, we need to think more holistically and develop collective housing typologies. This is the big idea, at the same scale as the urban morphology. So we're talking about designing all those beautiful qualities we love about cities. Most people would call those nice streets and squares. Urban designers like myself, we would call that the macro relationships that define the urban fabric. So ideas of hierarchy, differentiation of space, balance, all delivering patterns of economic and social activities, a complex web of components that rely on each other for mutual support. So you can look at this example from Barcelona, and we can tell by looking at that beautiful street that there's another nearby, likely parallel street that's dedicated to moving vehicles that has a completely different character. We can also see something interesting happening on every junction. Ildefons Cerdà believed intersections were best utilized as community spaces. So each building typology contains housing above, economic functions at the ground floor, and yields to the community at the corner conditions. Our reading of this yields hierarchy, balance, differentiation, qualities of successful urban neighborhoods. But this is our gap, especially in Dubai. This is the result when mutual support is lost and typologies are conceived in isolation. So we have planners designing these roads, and we have collective housing, but there is a disconnect between the built form and the urban morphology, which results in a neighborhood of comparatively limited value. Its ability to respond to changing market conditions, ability to consider other functions, ability to support families through growth stages, these are all limited due to the spatial disconnect of the neighborhood. When we get this wrong, many other things become far more difficult. Lofty terms like regenerative approaches or sustainable urbanism or smart cities hold little value when a neighborhood has poor spatial performance. So what can we do about it? Well, I have some ideas, and this is going to be a crash course in typological thinking to address that gap between planning and architecture in our profession, typological urbanism. So first, what is type? Type is the model of an organizational principle. We're a little bit academic, but this is quite important to understand. And typology is the study of an organizational principle. So if we apply these to buildings, they embody the basic organizational performance, the history, the meaning of precedent types, and new design solutions. So we can analyze real-world examples of built projects to understand their impact on their surroundings. So here we have 6 common typologies. I'm sure you all know many examples of these. Looking at one doesn't tell us much, a villa, a slab block, a row house, but when we look at these in series, we can get a better understanding of the qualitative aspects of our proposals, because implicit in each typology is the effect on the surrounding space. So let's start with villa communities. Villa communities are good at what I'm arguing for, which is designing a morphology along with a typology. However, the problem is when providing private space at the expense of the collective, we're again locking in low-value neighborhoods. It's an introverted type with no hierarchy or a spatial definition, delivers low densities and few amenities. But what about the courtyard typology? Slightly better at organizing space. Here is an introverted type, but it does have external ambitions. The courtyard organizes internal and external space. It addresses the street. There's less land take, which allows more collective space, but it does have problems with daylighting. But you can see in this neighborhood from Abu Dhabi that we can use this in a way to overlay an open space, SICA, and courtyard network against the vehicular network to create quite a sophisticated open space network. Or let's move up a scale to the terrace house. So this is a compact type with external ambitions. Here we can begin to see urban sequences developing. So we've got the garden in the back, the house, the frontage to the street. It's a compact type with external ambitions. It delivers density and can create walkable streets and urban amenities, as we see here in London. Less land take to allow more collective space, but we can also see its weaknesses. Problems with daylighting, problems with the corner condition, problems with parking. Or same type, new grain. Here we see a neighborhood with clear ideas about parking, resolving that corner condition, but also providing more scales of collective space. It's using design to mitigate the typological weakness of the terrace house. I'm not saying one is better than the other. The idea is to be aware of the tangible effects of the urban proposals and design these accordingly. The perimeter block. This is my favorite block. Urban designers have favorite blocks, like landscape architects have favorite plants. So this is the original live-work typology. Sustainability is baked into it. In the past, people lived above, they worked below around the courtyards, and they sold the goods on the street. We call that a block with functional intelligence. So it's really great because there's no spatial ambiguity and delivers a coherent neighborhood structure, as we can see here in Stockholm, and actually many areas in Europe. There's a clear hierarchy within the block center, and that then pushes activity to the exterior, which creates active streets. It retains private space in the building interior. It's great for passive cooling, and it's safe by design, meaning that there are a lot of eyes on the street. However, it has poor daylighting, and it does have a high land take, could be considered too urban, for example. So if the center of the block is important, what happens when we lose the center? The slab block. This where we trade the hierarchy of the center for undefined green space. So here we have strong edge conditions spatially. We have good passive cooling. We have small land take, which gives us more green space. However, loosely defined spaces, they lack hierarchy. They lack private collective space. And that lack of spatial definition can be unsafe. And lastly, the tower block. So the darling of developers. It delivers high densities, which is great. It's highly productive and sustainable, and it has small land take. But this is the real problem with them: terrible spatial definition. The tower, by design, is really a collection of facades which trades its relationship to the ground in order to provide limitless functions above. The ground is sacrificed in the expense of building logistics, lift cores, servicing. Therefore, it requires a plinth to expand that footprint and retain its functional diversity and contribute positively to the urban environment. So for the architects here, I'm going to say something a little bit contentious. The most important part of designing a tower is how it reaches the ground. But when we start thinking about all these types working together, the possibilities of combining their various strengths and weaknesses, we can generate some very compelling urban forms, as seen here in London. We have the tower, the slab, the row house, and the perimeter, all working together with mutual support to cover each other's weaknesses and leverage their strengths. And in doing so, we are able to design at this scale, link the scale of the architecture to the scale of the city. So the topologies are working together, yeah, to establish that scale. That's really important. So if we come back to Dubai, we have medium density, But the problem is we don't deliver that spatial definition, which is an attitude towards how the streets should be treated, the spaces in between buildings, the central park. Everything lacks coherence, which means everywhere is the same. This neighborhood has a limited ability to lock in more value than commuter housing. So we need to think more holistically about large-scale development. And lastly, on open space. I've selected open space because after the last section, I know it's a little bit abstract, a little bit academic, but really this is how we design a grain-based urbanism approach. And open space is the most relatable of the topic of the component of the urban morphologies. So first, what's the role of open space? I'm a simple man, you know, I think it's to bring people together, but I also think that's the role of the city. Really, it's to create spaces where people feel welcome, comfortable, and challenged to interact and gather. And I'm grateful that I live in an ambitious city like Dubai, where it's planning to double the per capita green space by 2040. But I'm here to argue we should be delivering quality along with quantity, which would put us on par with New York City, where we have very defined green spaces, but far behind London, which has less defined green spaces, but the buildings are beginning to shape the definition, as we can see in Queen Elizabeth Park here. So let's talk about how we can use open space to improve the spatial performance of the morphologies. Pocket parks, how can they best be used? So pocket parks are fun because you can really celebrate the hyper-local. Here, they're best when they're of relief in the fabric and well-defined. They're connected to a street, they're oriented for people watching, and they contain threshold conditions. Here, the park is part of that morphology. It manages that functional transition between the formal activities of the block where people are living to the informal activities of the beach. You can even see how future phases will respond positively and hinge off the design and build to the left of the image. Really nicely done. Or here in London, where, you know, the park is really treated as leftover space. So more green space is not necessarily more value. Here, it's leftover and it doesn't contribute positively to the neighborhood because there's many other green spaces of better value. It's not responding to the typologies. Or we go up a scale to the neighborhood park. This is my favorite neighborhood. This is in Lima. And here, the parks are doing what I've been arguing for. They're designed at the same scale as the urban morphology along with it. So here, they're really an extension of the residential neighborhood. So we have pedestrian access during the day, but at night they're closed and they're gated so that but they're still accessible to people who live along those perimeter of them. They're designed for overlooks so they're safe. Inside, they're of a scale where they also contain some private areas, so you get a richness to the parks, and they're well maintained. Really, a network of well-defined spaces can be more than the sum of their parts. You can walk through each of these. It's a really wonderful urban experience. Or exactly what we're trying to avoid, which is in Abu Dhabi, where the great park design by the landscape architects is ultimately limited in value because of the spatial disconnect, because the roads have been over-designed for future tower development that has not arrived. And even when it does arrive, they won't be connected to this park because of the nature of the roads themselves. Here's one of mine. So ideas in action. Let's go up a scale again to a district park. This is what we call grain-based urbanism, where we design the relationships we're looking for in each block, and then we scale them up. So here we have a linear park, which organizes the space, supported by courtyard typology blocks that have a permeable edge condition to provide physical and visual connectivity from the families in those blocks into the park because we want to activate it. It's very important that linear parks are activated and have sufficient density. They should act as a neighborhood connector and connect various neighborhoods and contain integrated mobility networks. Have porous boundary conditions is very important. So they're not just something you look at, but you can experience much more easily. And designed with overlook, they contain civic elements and they have multimodal access and parking. Here's the district park, which doesn't work so well because it's spread too thin, the activity, with insufficient densities and non-permeable boundary conditions. So you're limited to walking kind of a linear route, but that's about it. There's not the sort of urban experience that we would like to get out of a district park. This is a neighborhood in Dubai. And then lastly, because I'm running out of time, the city park, the biggest scale. Singapore leading by example as usual. It's best when connected to a larger natural systems. So here we're connected to the sea, accessible by multiple modes, public transport, pedestrians, and vehicles, contain areas of public, semi-public, and private space, a variety of uses and activation, because they have their own magnetism of this scale, and they're representative of city identity. Here you can see the park and the city morphology is guiding the future building typologies. And what to avoid? the open space equivalent of a gated community. I feel like every urban golf course should be a public park, but I'm an urbanist, right? So what's next? Are we going to ask, what is that beautiful house? Or are we going to ask, my God, what have I done? So it's important to think big, but the designers need to demonstrate how a three-dimensional fabric will have those same qualities we love about traditional cities: hierarchy, balance, differentiation of spaces, patterns of economic and social activity, and they all rely on each other for constant mutual support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shawn, for that compelling presentation. Rather, I have to say it was a treat to the eyes. Your vision truly redefines how we imagine cities of tomorrow. All right, on that note, let's move forward and let's welcome our second speaker, Mr. Rahul Kadri, Principal Architect at IMK Architects. He's widely known for designing spaces that are socially responsible, environmentally sensitive, and deeply contextual. Some of his celebrated projects include the Malabar Hill Elevated Walkway in Mumbai, Sona Vistas and Sona University in Bengaluru, Auric Hall in Aurangabad, and the Symbiosis campus in Pune. Let's welcome architect Rahul Kadri. We're very eager to hear his insights on designing for livability and community connection in rapid urbanizing environments. A warm welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pooja, and thank you, Godrej. I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah. Shawn, that was amazing. Rapid fire. I had to really pay attention to keep up with your fast-paced New York speaking.
My pleasure. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, not at all. A very different scale of work and a conversation that you're going to have. Basically, you're going to talk about little intervention that was done in the city where, this is the forgotten part of the city. It's a 12.5 acres of forest that literally nobody knew existed. So I'd been going there as a child, and during lockdown, we kind of jumped the fence and went in there and decided that that's something we needed to do to bring this experience to the public, because having a genuine tropical forest in the middle of a city like Bombay is just so unique. I think it's unique anywhere in the world. So this space had been going through many challenges. Encroachment, people were brewing liquor here in the nights, all kinds of other activities were going on in the night. People were throwing garbage. Slums were beginning to encroach from the east side of it. And landslides also had happened in some of the spaces in the north of here. So, when we thought of doing a trail, we knew that it would have to be an elevated trail, because we didn't want people to interact with the forest. There are reptiles and snakes there, and that would affect their life. So it was a very simple solution of raising it, and the trail is such that even though the contours of the hill are quite steep, it's designed so that it has a 1 in 12 slope that even a wheelchair can go on it. So it regulates the natural flow of water, and because of this V-shaped columns, the impact on the forest floor is actually very low. And so visitors get to enjoy the greenery without disturbing the forest. And, just India having the kind of numbers that we have, we thought if it was a normal trail on the forest floor, people would kind of wander off and want to explore the forest, and then soon they're trampling on all the plants, etc., and nothing would be left. So it's been amazing that ever since it opened, there are 200 people allowed on this 500-meter stretch every hour, and it's been full. So it's been 3,600 people using this little walkway every day. We've used very teak wood that's grown in India. We were looking at sal wood, which has been used by the railways forever. But instead, we decided to use Marba wood, which is stronger and takes a better polish. It's originally an Indonesian wood, but now it's grown in India. And another very important aspect, in which we don't deal with very often, in India, we like to make everything very bright. So we had to be very careful with the BMC who was building this, that we light it in such a way that it only lights the walkway and there's no pollution at all spilling out into the forest. So it was just safety for people walking, and the animals and the birds, their circadian rhythms aren't disturbed at all. So I don't know how many of you have actually been on it, but it's quite an experience in an urban setting to have this walkway. This really came about, we've been doing many projects for the government, for the city, but it's very difficult getting things built. So this time we decided to collaborate with the resident association, so the Nepean Road Residents Association and a corporate house to sponsor the design and probably help us navigate with the government. So this collaboration in getting things done is crucial. And it was because of our collaboration with the residents, we got an appointment with the environmental minister, Aditya Thackeray, who, we had three options. This was the best one, which disturbed the forest floor least, etc., made out of wood, and he selected this. So I know many architects, urban planners, designers want to contribute in the city, but they, very often get lost on, how to navigate the system. So what I'm putting out is that, this is one of the ways. Collaborate with a resident association. There is definitely one in your area. And then, work out some kind of sponsorship and corporate sponsorship, at least someone who can make some calls and get an appointment with the concerned person. The other idea, which the BMC, we all know there's a lot of improvement work in the city, and they have a huge budget. So this is an idea that came about from a small city in South America, wherein the mayor promised that 30% of the capital budget would be spent on projects that were initiated by the residents. And this idea has really caught on and is now, I think there are 2,000 cities all over the world. Pune is one of them, where 30% of the capital budget is decided by the residents, projects that the residents want. I mean, can you imagine the difference it would make to our neighborhoods if, we all had a chance to put up a plan to improve our neighborhood, and the government and the BMC actually built it. So what I feel we need to do is really form collaborations with, as I said before, resident association and the architects. And we have an architects group of 200 plus architects who are more than willing to collaborate with any resident group to come up with these plans. And what we're also thinking of, the way there are funds, there are startup funds. We're thinking of an urban design seed fund, wherein we would give 5 lakhs to any designer who teams up with a resident association to develop the concept, develop the plans up to the design and the cost, so that we can then, at the end of the year, present at least 30 or 40 of these to the BMC. And the BMC then has ready-made designs and proposals that they can work on. So this is one of my pet ideas. The other thing, looking at Shawn's work and ideas, what happens in India is that we are still stuck in the Maharashtra Town Planning Act, which was made into an act in 1966. And that act is our law, and our planning processes come from that act. And that act is based on what England was doing in the 1930s. So if you read the Maharashtra Town Planning Act, all it does is zoning. It's land use planning and nothing else. There is when we talk of reforms in the government, this is one of the laws that need to be changed maximum, because the government and the bureaucracy can only do what's in the law. They cannot bypass the law. The last development plan that Bombay had, there was a group of people who got together, and there was a Mumbai Transformation Group formed, and they tried to contemporize urban planning using a lot of the principles that Shawn spoke about, the perimeter block being one of them, to popularize that, because as you know, by law in Mumbai, you cannot have the perimeter block. You can only have towers. To the extent that the MRTP Act doesn't have a mention of environment or ecology, those words, were not important in the 1930s in England. England, of course, has moved on greatly. In fact, they don't have a master planning system at all, whereas we still do. So I think all of us ought to get aware of this reform that needs to happen, because none of the ideas any of the architects or urban planners want to put forth is possible, because we're literally shackled by the MRTP Act. It does not allow us to do anything. And as we speak today, as Shawn said, urbanization happening at a rapid rate. Maharashtra is looking at 2 new towns, the Panvel around the airport zone and Naina, and they're making the same mistakes over hundreds of square miles. They're just following the MRTP Act. It's just land use planning, and there is not even a mention of watershed management. There is no mention even of transportation of any kind. So I feel this is one of the most important things we need to reform in the government, because right now it's all just plotting and developer led and nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Architect Rahul, for such an insightful presentation. And once again, thank you so much, Shawn and Architect Rahul, for those powerful and thought-provoking presentations. Your project highlights 2 crucial yet distinct approaches to city making. As Architect Rahul mentioned, his focus was on rootedness, wellness, and human scale. And as to Shawn's vision of integrating global urban strategies with innovation and adaptability. All right, so before we move on to the Q&A session, I just thought that if we can quickly come on to a quick discussion and share your ideas on this pertinent topic, we can start with either with Architect Rahul or with Mr. Shawn.
Yeah, so Shawn, that your presentation and your quick lesson in urban planning was amazing. 2 or 3 things I want to ask you.
Sure.
When you're planning a town and the rural areas, a lot of people speak about the 7 stages or transect, which goes from rural, agricultural, semi-rural, semi-urban, and then to the core. where you have your towers, etc. So do you think that so that people get a variety of experience, from going out from the center, going out to, and then all the typologies you spoke about really get applied there. So what would your thought on that?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So in general, we are limited to like urban projects in urban areas. We don't develop in the hinterlands or rural areas. If we did, it would be a different approach with different typologies that better address the low developmental densities and likely how you could still retain patterns of activity and intensity despite those low densities, usually in collective spaces and around community areas, or ideally public transport that would take you to the urban areas. For the specific urban projects, it depends on a number of things. One of the questions was, what's a good proportionate mix of different typologies for an urban setting? I mean, the answer depends on many things. So it's the project, it's the context, it's what your developmental ambition and the client's ambitions are. And what's the unit brief? How many homes are you trying to create, or commercial office space? And what's the relationship between all of those? So typological thinking gives you another level of control to approach large scale projects because I can drop in courtyard blocks and automatically understand roughly what those are going to perform spatially, unit types, unit numbers, densities, parking, access, all those really difficult things that you can manage all simultaneously because you're working across skills like that. So in short, depends on the project, depends on what you're trying to do, but really the important thing is understanding what types you're proposing and the spatial performance of those. So if I have 6 courtyard blocks, I wouldn't put those along the water because you're creating interior spaces that look into a courtyard instead of something which is looking at the sea. You'd use a modified block, which opens up a bit, more views to the sea, also has a street edge and a promenade on the other side. So that's how design gets into the thinking, and you can evolve the type as needed for a project, if that's clear.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
Mm.
And of late, there's this thing of the 15-minute city and mixed use is a lot of people talking about it. Have you designed any such 15-minute neighborhoods, and what's your experience been?
So there's another question on that here, which is, can we turn our existing cities into 15-minute cities? The answer is always yes, but. So design-wise, absolutely. It's normally policy that we have the biggest challenge of addressing. A good example of that would be we're doing a master plan in Baghdad, and its MO is really it's called Future City. Even though Baghdad has a rich history, the client wants to only think about the forward. But it's funny because future is a slippery word sometimes. Future on Neom is different from future in Baghdad because Baghdad, you can actually have mixed use buildings. So how do you develop, rich 15-minute like polycentric organizations in cities and neighborhoods when you can't have mixed use? So there are design strategies that we deploy to do that, but it's just it's a question of context and place and policy. Hopefully, in most sophisticated parts with planning systems, that's already kind of being embedded. I'm happy to see Dubai and Abu Dhabi have come a long way in their 2040 plans to have more public transport, areas around public transport destined for higher densities, looking at TOD development. So it's an understanding of, as designers, if you happen to be in a part of the world that doesn't have a strong planning system, have very strong opinions about what creates good neighborhoods, good urban neighborhoods, and try to argue with whoever to get those implemented.
All right, thank you so much. Moving forward, let's quickly do a poll. We have a very interesting question that the team has come up with. So what happens is that I'm going to talk about the question here, and there will be 4 options to the question. And if I can request our audience members to quickly vote to whichever option they feel is suitable as with regards to the question. So quickly, let's move ahead. And the question is, what's the biggest priority for designing tomorrow's cities? And the options are climate-friendly infrastructure, that's A. B is affordable and inclusive housing. C is better public transport. And the last one is more green and open spaces. So you have about 15 seconds to quickly vote and let us know, and let's see which is the answer which gets the major votes. So I'll repeat the question. It says, what is the biggest priority for designing tomorrow's cities? And there are 4 options. You can see it on the screen. So if I can request our audience members to quickly vote. I can see the voting is happening quite quick, and it's going to be quite exciting to see actually which is the option that's going to be getting the most percentage in the 4 options that we have. So we have about 10 seconds more. So quickly, if I can request our audience members to quickly go and vote for this question that we have, that is, what's the biggest priority for designing tomorrow's cities? All right. And the percentage is just going up and down, up and down. So another 5 seconds. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's see what are the answers. So the highest percentage, the audience members have given votes to the last option. And the question is, what is the biggest priority for designing tomorrow's cities? And the audience members have voted for the last option, and that is more green and open spaces. So thank you so much to our audience members for voting for this question. All right, moving on after this power-packed session, it's time to take some audience questions. So I will quickly ask audience questions to our guests and they can answer. So first up, we have the question for Mr. Shawn. The question is, it starts with saying insightful. And then the question is, we obviously cannot have any one typology in isolation. What would be a good proportionate mix of the different typologies for an urban setting? Over to you.
Thanks, Pooja. I answered this in my question with Rahul, but in summary, it depends on the project. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Every type has different impact on the neighbors, on the open space, on access, on parking. So depending on what kind of a neighborhood you're trying to design, or so you're trying to design, that would affect what kind of type you're trying to use. I think what's like my favorite argument about type is that like the difference between master planners or urban designers and architects really is architects were trained to look at iconic buildings and understand the lessons from there and apply those to their designs. But urban designers, it's really the dominant type of the city. This is something that Aldo Rossi talked about many years ago in some nice architecture books. But really, it's like the unsexy, the uninteresting buildings, because that's really what forms cities. And the performance of those is how the city performs. So that's why you can look at a row house or a terrace house or a tower, whatever it might be, and really understand how a city is going to perform. If I have a city or a project of only towers versus a project of kind of low rise, 6-7 story building, those are going to perform much differently in terms of how you treat streets, how you treat access, how you treat waste, basements, all of that stuff. So it just depends. Implicit in the type is what you're trying to design for the project.
All right. Thank you so much. Next up is for architect Rahul. The question is, your projects often feel deeply human and rooted in context. How do you ensure emotional and environmental sensitivity in large-scale developments?
Those are questions we ask at the beginning of a project always. How are people going to feel here? Who are the different groups of people who are going to use these spaces, and how also, is it friendly? Is it friendly? Can a community form here easily? Will interaction happen here? So that's one part. So, the urban design projects we've done and the township we've done, the questions are always about friendliness, neighborliness, um, and whether these spaces and the scale of the spaces are such that these interactions will happen. So we use the perimeter block a lot in our plans, and environmentally. So so it's I grew up in the forests of Nainital, and to me, nature is so bringing nature to our buildings and to our people is crucial. And there's something that deeply touched me that Charles Moore said. He said that there are two essential things that human beings crave for. One is to belong, to be a part of a community, and the other is to live in the forest. And both these things, urban capitalist living kind of takes away from us. We are isolated, we have nuclear families, we don't live, necessarily with our communities that we've grown up with. We move a lot, and living in the forest in India is impossible. So, but those are things we really crave for, and that's what we are always mindful of. That these are can we bring these two back in the way we design?
That's such a lovely thought, sir. Thank you so much. All right, next up, the question is for Shawn. It says, as someone who's worked across continents, how does your global perspective shape localized design strategies in the Middle East?
Great question. There's a heightened responsibility of designing cities in an arid region. We have more constraints that way in terms of how do you, well, other than the sustainability concerns, use of water, use of energy, how do we ensure that we have spaces which are activated as much year-round as we can for the community? How do we create places that people will love and have a sense of ownership over, when it's not a culture currently, well, in the past, even the recent past, not really a culture of collective space like we see in other parts of the world, just because of the way the buildings were designed and the way the infrastructure has been and things of that nature. So my passion is really about how do I understand those design strategies that work globally, whether it's in Asia, where they're really great at combining density with economic growth, or in the more mature neighborhood structures of Europe, or some of the even the informal economies in South America or in India, like understanding what's successful, what doesn't work, and then getting to apply those on a sort of project by project basis is something that I really love and am passionate about doing.
Lovely. All right, next is for architect Rahul. It says, what is one urban design trend you believe is overrated and one you think is underrated or underexplored?
One urban design trend that's overrated is high-rise towers. Definitely. People believe that you can achieve higher densities with high-rise towers, whereas that's not the case at all. They waste a lot of space. So that's one trend that's ruining most cities. And sorry, what was the second one? What's the second part of the question?
Underrated and underexplored.
Well, underrated and underexplored is the perimeter block, which in, for example, in Mumbai, I think most of the viewers are from here. That is what British Bombay was all about. The parts of the city that we love was the perimeter block. And after the 1950s, the development control rules changed, and we had to leave a setback from the road. And so there's this tremendous wastage of space around every building, and it doesn't form the edge of the street. So the DN roads of the world, or the British Bombay had a scale, and the road had an edge, and there was a shopping street there, which is completely lost. So yeah, so I think the perimeter block for city and density, and we see any city in the world where, you know, pedestrians use it more, it's the perimeter block. Of course, of a certain scale. If you make the road too big, then it doesn't work.
All
Can I
right,
take this one also?
please.
Yeah.
Great answers, Rahul. I agree with all of your points. For me, most overrated would be the smart city, or now it's being called the cognitive city. I think it's just a catch-all for somebody to sell somebody expensive technology. I think the smartest city is one that's been designed appropriately with the right scale of blocks and for the scale of quality and the quality of life that we're trying to achieve. And the most underrated would be like really radical mixed-use projects because they're like TODs are good are the start of that, but radical mixed use is riskier and more difficult to develop. So developers naturally shy away from approaching something like that. But that's the kind of stuff that happens naturally in places like New York. But that's because that is the product of a very rich and dynamic urban grain, urban morphology. So to actually start with that is quite challenging, but I would like to see that explored more.
All right. So next one question we'll take for Shawn, and that is it possible to turn our existing cities into 15-minute cities where everything is nearby?
Yes, it is. But again, it's a question of policy as much as anything else. So in all of the designs that every design is a 50-minute city or less. In all of our projects, we understand the population counts and the requisite community facilities that we need, and those are designed within dense, compact, walkable communities. Even our landscape-led residential communities over here are designed that way. So the answer is yes. The problem is, how do you retrofit some of these cities that have more archaic planning systems to achieve this? You need political will in a lot of places and good design.
All right. So we'll take one last.
Yeah. No. May I give my take on that, please? So it's physically possible, but presently in India, it's impossible. It's impossible because, as Shawn said, policy is involved and political will. Now, let's just look at that a little further. Why is political will not there in India, right? And so that leads you to ask, okay, who's in charge, right? So it's also about our political system, which the minister has no clue about urban planning. The urban development minister has never thought about it. So for him, the only thing is development and developers, So that's why, and then who does he talk to? He only talks to developers, nobody else. So our system changes where people who know are taking the decisions, things aren't going to change. And Mumbai doesn't have an urban planning department. It's ad hoc. It's completely ad hoc. We have a 20-year plan, which is a land use plan, and that's it. There's no planning at all. So it's Ram Bharose, everything. We need to radically kind of evolve who makes the decisions in India. And anything we're talking about, Shawn, you're talking about green space and trying to make it better. Mumbai has green space of 1.42 square meters per person. Where is 68 of London?
Not a lot. Yeah.
And we're at 1.42. To increase the numbers, they started counting even the roundabouts, which are not accessible at all. They started counting private open spaces, everything, just to bring the numbers up. So it's ridiculous, but nobody's aware of it. It's just because just politically our system doesn't work. And we can have all the ideas and thoughts, but till we don't change that, nothing's happening.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing this problem and, of course, sharing such an important suggestion. And I'm sure I just hope it reaches to the right people for a better India. All right. On that note, let's move forward and actually congratulate and thank our speakers. What an enriching conversation. Thank you so much, Architect Rahul and Mr. Shawn, for offering such deep perspectives on rethinking our urban future. A heartfelt thank you to all our speakers, our amazing audience, and the entire GVCC community for being with us today. Let's continue to build better, smarter, and more human cities, one design decision at a time. Stay tuned for episode 9 of We See Live, and until then, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Thank you so much. Please take care.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you very much, Rahul. Thanks, Pooja.
Meet up
Thank
with you
Godrej.
at some point. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. Thanks.
Your time. Thank you.
Thrusters. Check. Door lock check.
डोर लॉक घर का डोर लॉक किया था या भूल गया
घर का लॉक।
फटाफट से चेक करके आऊं क्या
ले आइए गोदरेज IoT 9 डिजिटल लॉक, 9 सिक्योर एक्सेस मोड्स, ऑटोमेटिक लॉकिंग ट्रिपल बोल्ट और कई एडवांस फीचर्स। अब घर के अंदर या बाहर रहो बेफिक्र।
घर जाते ही गोदरेज डिजिटल लॉक लगवाऊंगा
Welcome to the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, where innovation meets collaboration. GVCC is a unique platform for architects and interior designers to merge their creative visions with our innovative product offerings. We aim to cultivate a network of thought leaders, driving innovation and excellence in the industry. Celebrate your achievements with our GV's awards, recognizing innovative projects across various verticals. Join our community through exhibition visits and masterclasses to stay updated on the latest trends and technologies. Enjoy exclusive access to new products, special discounts, and tours of our Mumbai and Goa plants. Join the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club today. Be part of a community that values innovation, collaboration, and sustainability.